Story 1. I do not fear death. It is a natural conclusion to life. It will either be a new adventure or my opportunity to escape it all. Story 2. I wouldn't say I fear death, but I fear how or when it may happen. It can be sudden, and there is nothing anyone can do to stop it. It would be difficult to die slowly or to be harmed in a severe way. Story 3. Death is fine. It's dying that I'm worried about. I'm not afraid of death for the same reason I'm not afraid of the time before I was born. Story 4. Don't fear death. I was a drug addict for 15 years and I have been riding a motorcycle since 1980. My only hope is that I outlive my dog, as she is very devoted to me. It would crush her if I died before her. Story 5. As Twain said, I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions of years before I was born and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. Story 6. I didn't realize the significance until I had a baby. Before, there were no real stakes. I had no clear plans for my life, so there was nothing to miss out on. When I died, I would just be dead. Now, I would be affecting a couple of people's lives by dying. Story 7. I don't typically worry. My only fear is not being around for my son because he is still young. However, I feel very close to God. I know where I am going when my time is up. Story 8. It's not that I don't fear it. I'm not actively hoping to die or anything, but I've made peace with the inevitability of it. I also believe in God. Whether I'm right or not in those beliefs, they are a comfort. Story 9. As I get older, I think about death more often. I am currently 50. It is hard to imagine not being on Earth and having life and history continue without me. It is strange to consider not existing anymore. Reflecting on this has helped me understand why people turn to religion for reassurance and comfort. Story 10. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of transitioning from the real world to the afterlife without my control. I feel that if I faced a slow death, I would not give up on life because I would be so scared. I have post-traumatic stress disorder, general anxiety, and depression, so I dislike change. Story 11. I don't fear death. I had suicidal thoughts for a couple of years, but not anymore. I fear what comes before death. Sickness, dementia, depending on others. That is my worst nightmare. Story 12. We all will die someday. Our lives are a brief moment in the timeline of the entire universe. There is no point in worrying about it. I live every day as if it were my last, without regrets. Story 13. It is inevitable, which makes me think that if I die, it is probably for a reason, and somehow that makes me feel more calm than I fear it. Story 14. I experienced love in this life. I found someone to call my own, not just to my friends, but also to the government. Everything else is just a bonus. It's like winning the final level of a game. I found my princess and I'm content. Story 15. I don't fear death, but I do fear dying foolishly. I have come close a few times, as I enjoy participating in high-risk sports and physical challenges in search of greater adrenaline highs. I have suffered several broken bones and a few mild concussions, but so far, I am still here and somewhat wiser than in my teens and 20s. Story 16. I don't fear death or being dead. After all, I no longer exist to experience it. What I am really not looking forward to is the dying part. I hope to simply sleep through it. Story 17. I do not fear death. It is a natural conclusion to living. It is inevitable for everyone and every being. If something is alive, then that same something will eventually die. I am not sure if I believe in an afterlife, but I do believe in reincarnation and that the end is not truly the end of a soul. The physical body dies. That is all. Story 18. To me, fear of death wastes the time you spend alive. It will happen. For now, enjoy the gift of consciousness. It might also help to think of death as a transitional adventure rather than the end, even if it is. Embrace the beauty of it, my friends. Story 19. I am not afraid of the other side. I am 42 years old. My parents both crossed over in the last 2 years. They are both there. Jesus is there. I almost welcome it. Story 20. I don't fear death because it's natural. We all are going to die someday. Why fear something that is inevitable? Story 21. I grew up in an area where young people died. I really thought it was normal and a regular part of life, so everything since I left feels like a bonus. I am very grateful. Story 22. I was some of the mud that got to sit up and look around. Lucky me, lucky mud. The only way I can feel the least bit important is to think of all the mud that didn't even get to sit up and look around. I got so much, and most of the mud got so little. Thank you for the honor. Now mud lies down again and goes to sleep. What memories for mud to have. Kurt Vonnegut, Cat's Cradle. Story 23. Death does not scare me. Cancer did not take me, so now I feel obligated to overcome the fear of death on behalf of all cancer survivors. Story 24. I don't fear death, mostly because I spent a big part of my life wishing I wouldn't wake up at all. But now I don't fear it because I'm actually excited. I feel alive and grateful. I know if I'm supposed to die, it's God's will. The fact that I'm still here, despite everything I did to not be, is proof enough for me that it wasn't my time. I used to call myself an optimistic nihilist. Now, I can't deny there's something higher. Honestly, there's no earthly logic to how I've survived the things I have over and over in excess. It defies reason. By all accounts, I would be completely dead if it weren't for something bigger holding me. So no, I don't fear death. I've come to trust that someone, or something, is looking out for me, even if it doesn't fit the world's expectations or make sense to anyone else. Story 25. No fear. I have seen the other side through advanced spiritual practice. It is pure love. I do hope the actual transition is a gentle one, but I look forward to what comes after. Story 26. We all die someday. Why spend your time fearing that day when there are 1,000 great days ahead of you? Story 27. I will slap the boatman's hand, hook my thumbs, clap my palms, and tell him how impressive he looks. I will ask if I can hold his scythe. I have to go sometime. Story 28. I don't fear death. I'm a nurse and have supported many while they took their last breath. I have seen many causes of death and many horrible deaths where people drown in their own bodily fluids or can't find peace in the lead up to their departure. But death is better than a life filled with suffering and lacking quality. Death is better than losing functions such as swallowing or talking. Death is better than being in a forced position because of health conditions. I don't fear death. I fear not being able to donate my organs when I'm gone, and I fear becoming a widow unexpectedly at any moment because I know it can happen. I fear not living enough life and experiences. Story 29. I became more aware than I could ever describe in words. I saw through reality itself and hoped to share with the world everything I came to know. I observed how we all share thoughts and experiences. It felt like one mind communicating with itself. We never truly die. We have reincarnated more times than we remember, living every life before us. We do it repeatedly, learning and expanding each time. We pass on what we learn. Our soul always continues. Story 30. I am more concerned about the impact my death would have on others. They would have to mourn and manage my debt and funeral expenses. It sounds inconvenient, and I would not want to burden anyone with that. Story 31. I fear the death of others because I am not good at dealing with it. My own death, the act of dying, will be challenging, but death itself, I am not afraid at all. I have already experienced a sense of death for an infinite number of years. It was not bad. Story 32. I am more afraid of dying in a painful way because I don't want to feel the pain, but am I actually afraid of death? No. I think it's the only peace I will ever have. Story 33. I used to not fear it, but now that I have children, I do. I cannot imagine leaving them behind. I just try not to think about it. Story 34. I don't really fear death itself. I more fear the idea of leaving things unfinished or the people I care about behind. Story 35. I only fear what leads to my death. I welcome death otherwise. I embrace non-existence. Yes, please make it quick and painless. Story 36. If I'm being honest, I occasionally feel sad about the inevitability of death, although I wouldn't call it fear. I want to die in a way that allows me to be aware of my last fleeting moments as life comes to an end. As far as I can tell, we only get to truly experience death once. If I were to die in my sleep or by something that happened instantly, I would feel a bit robbed of that experience, though I suppose it wouldn't really matter to my deceased self. Story 37. I have done everything I can for my family. They are all strong individuals who can live independently. I am in a lot of pain, both physically and mentally. I promised I would not actively seek to end my life. I have had family members do that, and I have seen the devastation it causes. When my time does come, it will be a welcome end to this experience. Story 38. I fear the act of dying. Can't be pleasant, and we are hardwired to fear it. I imagine knowing your life is coming to an end is horrifying in ways that I can't understand until it happens. But death? Death sounds peaceful. My brain shuts down. My psychology and identity completely fade away. I simply forget that I exist or existed. Maybe I actually remember that I never did at all. Please permit me to get a little philosophical and theological here. I believe in a single, unified state of being I call the One or the Is. All of the time, space, and matter in the universe is one single entity, not a personhood. I don't believe in a thinking, feeling God. There are mechanisms the universe uses unconsciously, since consciousness is a result of biology, to become aware of itself, and that's us. Any dividers we use to distinguish ourselves are the result of both psychology and natural selection. If there even is an I, am always in flux, my matter is always recycling, and the energy I use is as well. Nothing of me actually exists except that I am a waveform in the flow of matter and energy. So, when that wave dissipates, I will finally forget the illusion that I ever was. The only thing that is the is. I'm looking forward to when I get to be a part of that big is again. Story 39. I do not fear death because it would finally end the torture that has been my life. I look forward to the day I can stop living, so I do not spread that suffering to those around me. Story 40. I'm actually quite excited to die one day. If there is something after, I can't wait to find out. If there is nothing, well, I could not care less. Story 41. When I was 4 or 5, my stepdad put a gun to my head and told me if I moved or cried, he would beat me. He then proceeded to pull the trigger repeatedly while laughing. For the next 5 to 6 years, I was constantly terrified of dying. I hated being in the dark, and I hated being alone where death could find me more easily. When I was 10, my family went to the beach. My sisters and cousins got themselves into a bit of a situation. They swam out a bit and got stuck on a rock. Everyone went to help them. While they were gone, I wanted to swim more, so I swam as far out as I could. I got caught in the tide and was being pulled away. I tried to swim against the tide for what felt like an hour, but I only got further out. I began making peace with what I knew was inevitable. Then I thought about my mom and sisters and decided to keep trying. I swam to the ocean floor and used the rocks to crawl against the tide to pull myself out. I was terrified of death until I faced it directly. I realized the inevitability and futility of fighting or fearing death itself. Honestly, I found a kind of peace in a thought I didn't expect. Story 42. I believe in reincarnation. This life I am currently living hasn't been perfect, so I will be back. Story 43. I was in a traffic accident that felt like the end. For about 2 seconds, time slowed down as if it were 2 minutes. An incredible feeling of calm washed over me. I remember thinking, so this is how it happens. My kids, my wife, everyone is going to be all right. Then some things occurred, and I miraculously came through unscathed. I will never forget that calm. I am not looking forward to death, but I don't fear it because I know that calm will come. Story 44. Based on dreams and experiences I have had, I am almost certain we cross over to another realm of existence. Logically, I am not afraid, but I believe we are programmed to survive. If I were in a life and death situation, I am sure I would be terrified. Story 45. I don't fear death because quantum mechanics exists. If particles can be in 2 places at once and Schrödinger's cat can be dead and alive until I open the box, then who's to say I won't just deco here into a probability cloud and reassemble myself at a Waffle House in another dimension? Entropy may be inevitable, but so is the possibility that I'll quantum tunnel right through the void wearing socks with sandals and holding a taco. Death isn't the end, it's just me collapsing into a wave function that refused to follow classical logic, and honestly, that's kind of iconic. Story 46. I was in a serious motorcycle accident. They treated the incident as a fatality due to the damage to the truck and my bike. I don't remember any details because I was in a coma for about a week. I do remember people sitting at the end of my bed, but they never spoke. The feeling I had was that everything would be okay. I suffered from a traumatic brain injury that still affects my daily routine. The thought of death no longer scares me. I was right at the doorstep, and it wasn't scary at all. Story 47. Watching near-death experiences. I do not fear death. It seems like bliss and comfort once your soul is out of your body. Knowing this, I live with less fear of the inevitable. Story 48. I don't fear death, but I do fear the concept of surviving a traumatic experience. If someone tried to murder me but failed, I don't think I would live a high-quality life after that. Story 49. I don't fear death, but I am a little scared of dying. Death is inevitable, and I will be one with Mother Nature again. But the act can be incredibly painful, and I just hope I won't suffer for months or even longer before I die. At least when I'm dead, I will be at peace. Story 50. I feared death a lot when I was young. Now, not so much. When you are young, you feel good, life is great. You might feel afraid at the thought that it will end someday and wish you could live forever. Perhaps you see an injustice in that. Then you get older. You work a lot, there are bills to pay, and you feel tired all the time. Every day there is some problem to solve. Maybe your back or knees start to hurt one day, and that pain continues indefinitely. You go on like that for some years, your experience may vary. At a certain point, you say to yourself, you know what? Maybe I am not supposed to live forever. Story 51. I did at one point, but I don't anymore. I should have died several times in car crashes or from reckless actions I took. When it happens, it happens. Story 52. It's going to happen, so I don't fear it. I fear that as people, we work and raise our families for so long, and I want to live post-work long enough to reap the benefits of the years of working. Story 53. If I exist, then death does not. If death exists, then I do not. Why should I fear that which can only exist when I do not? Epicurus. Story 54. I used to fear death very much, but after struggling and suffering for 10 years with a rare chronic incurable neurological disease and having a quality of life at about 20% on a good day, death doesn't sound so bad anymore. I am no longer bothered when I wonder what it would be like or what happens when you die. Story 55. I am over 50 with no children. I am not worried about loved ones when I am gone. I choose to believe it will be a new form of existence and consciousness. All religions speak of a place after death where we are unified in love. The concepts of hell and punishment were created by powerful individuals to scare and manipulate the masses. Story 56. I don't fear something that is inevitable and don't believe there is anything after, so why worry about it? If anything, I fear the method of dying more. I would hate to die from a long, debilitating disease or in a fire. Thankfully, in Canada, we have medical assistance in dying, so in the first case, I would choose that option. Story 57. I was about to ask a similar question. Right now, I am concerned because there is so much I want to do. I am not so afraid that I would avoid taking risks, but I worry that I might miss out on valuable experiences. Personally, I believe there is nothing after life, so the thought of my consciousness disappearing feels really depressing. Story 58. Accepting that you are like every other animal on Earth can be challenging. Your consciousness is not unique. It arises from your physical brain. Once you let go of the belief in an immortal soul or a special place or purpose in the universe, you may find that there is no disconnect between your existence and the fact that it will eventually end. Story 59. I don't fear death, but I have tried to end it, and things or people have stopped me. I see death as a part of life that should not be feared, as it can either be the end of your time or the start of a new journey, depending on your perspective. Story 60. I have never been afraid of death, but I had not thought much about it. Recently, my father passed away from cancer. It was horrible, but I am not afraid of death. Instead, I experienced a moment where I could only think about when my time would come and what would truly happen. It is more of a curiosity, but it is sad because one must continue living, knowing that I am becoming more and more alone. Story 61. Because I know I will be reunited with the people I love the most. I am not religious, but I believe in spirit guides. Story 62. You should fear only things within your control, such as an untimely death or poor health resulting from your behavior. Story 63. I don't fear it that much, most likely because of the saying that all of us eventually die. I hate to admit it, but that's life. Story 64. Fear of being alone and helpless, along with the fear of pain and suffering, is overwhelming. Knowing that you have to face the sadness of never seeing your loved ones again is distressing. The thoughts and visions of your body decomposing after death are frightening. Story 65. I have had serious anxiety about this, but I have faced my fears, and at least for now I can say I don't fear it. Story 66. I only fear leaving anything unfinished behind at my death. When it's time to reunite with my ancestors and help others, I will gladly share the wisdom I can offer. Nobody knows what happens when we die, so why should we fear it? Story 67. I didn't exist before I was born, and that doesn't cause any fear. So why should it cause fear after I'm dead? Story 68. Don't fear death. I know it's coming. I just don't know when. What's the point in fearing the inevitable? Story 69. I don't really fear death itself. I'm not religious, so I believe that my consciousness ceases to exist as it did before I was born. The only fear I have is not knowing how and when it will happen and what the experience of dying will feel like, if that makes sense. I could die tomorrow in an accident, or I could die when I'm 100. Story 70. I have faced near-death experiences multiple times in my life, and I am 32 years old. At this point, if it happens, it happens. I can only try to survive, hope for the future, and do whatever I can. Story 71. I can't say I fear death. I am scared for when more of my loved ones go. However, as I deal with loss, I understand that there's nothing you can do to change the fate that has come or is coming. Accepting it and being grateful for the moments you have with those special people, or for experiencing life yourself, is a great help. Being grateful is a good mindset, in my opinion. Story 72. Anything has to be better than this. It would be unfortunate if it were a painful death, but I wouldn't have to go through a recovery from that pain, so I am ready for whatever comes next. Story 73. What is the point of fearing it if it will come anyway? The frightening aspect of the concept is the unknown that follows, but death itself is inevitable. As mortal beings, it is the norm. Story 74. I don't have fear. I have a terminal illness now. I am a Taoist. Acceptance is everything. It's out of my hands. Story 75. Because heroin has already killed me twice, and trust me, when you are dying, you won't even realize it. Story 76. I went from wanting to die to being scared to die. What makes me scared is basically the fear of missing out. I want to know what happens next. Story 77. I don't fear death. I'm actually looking forward to it. There will be no more pain or suffering. When it happens, it happens. I'm not going to rush it, but I am not going to fight it either. Story 78. It's not that I fear death. It's that I love being alive so much with the people I am with. I do not want that to end. Story 79. What's the point? Do you fear going to sleep every night? It's a normal part of life. You can't stop it, so just enjoy your life. When that time comes, that's that. There's no point in overthinking it. Story 80. No fear here. I am not self-destructive or reckless. I have had 2 experiences with cancer and made my peace the first time. All this extra time on Earth is a bonus. Story 81. I do not fear death. I fear my children not having a good life. I fear making them feel like they are not my top priority. I fear destroying my legacy, and someday, the only thing left of me in this world will be bad memories. Losing my children and family is infinitely more frightening to me than death. Story 82. I have fought against my mental health, and my life is getting better, good enough that I want to live. Dying feels scary now. Story 83. The older I get, the easier it is for me to cope with death. When I die, it is no longer my problem. Story 84. I grew up in tough circumstances and had a challenging life. I used to not fear death. In fact, I wouldn't have minded it. For the first time, I fear death because I can find joy in everyday activities that people engage in, instead of worrying about where my next meal is coming from. I think about dying every day. I feel as if I have just started living, and unfortunately, the thought of leaving it all behind haunts me. Story 85. I understand that later, when I reach an age where death seems imminent, the fear will fade away, and it will happen regardless. Additionally, I have not experienced most of history, so I believe I will be fine. Story 86. The cold, dead winter is just as much a part of life as the warm, living summer. Story 87. Personally, I view it as being right with God. In the past, I have struggled with suicidal thoughts, which is distressing, but I no longer feel that way. For me, it represents uncertainty regarding an unwanted prayer. Story 88. I want to survive this lifetime, but death is always lurking. Every day, the negative aspects of life can creep in and threaten your existence. I want to fear it, but I suppose I'll only truly be afraid if I am confronted with a situation that makes me realize it is unavoidable. Story 89. Life is unfair, and it keeps becoming increasingly unfair. There is nothing I truly want to hold on to. Story 90. The death of the body is an inherent truth. My soul is bound to remain on earth until my body decides my work is complete. I do not believe that I will cease to exist simply because my body dies. I think I fear life more than death. Story 91. Death is, to me, the best gift given to humanity. I have no reason to be afraid of this precious gift. Story 92. I don't have any fear, to be honest, but when I die, I want to die without any pain. Life is becoming unbearable. Story 93. I fear it currently because I haven't had a good life yet. I haven't been able to enjoy it. Born into poverty and trying to climb out, but I just can't quite make it. I'd like to enjoy something before I go. I guess it's more the fear of a wasted opportunity I'll never get back. Story 94. I think a fear of death is normal due to the uncertainty and permanence it brings. But it happens to everyone, death and taxes. I'm middle-aged and think about death from time to time, but I feel there have been events in my life that seemed far worse than the fate of death itself. Story 95. I don't fear it because I have no control over when it happens, and it will happen. When fear sets in, do something to get out of your own head. I usually read a challenging book or go out in nature to count all the different trees, birds, and flowers I see. Don't be the thief of your own joy. Story 96. I don't fear death, but I am afraid of accidentally surviving and having to live with physical consequences. Story 97. I don't fear the how and when death will happen. When it's my time, and nothing I can do will change that. What I fear is being dead, missing everyone and everything, quite like living. Story 98. When I was a kid, I choked really badly. I couldn't cough, talk, or breathe. After a while, I accepted that this was how I was going to die. I remember thinking, this is how I go, and I was at peace with it. Then my brother saved me by performing the Heimlich maneuver. I was shaken up afterward, but I often think about that moment of peace and bliss, and I don't fear it. Another near-death experience I remember was when I fell into the pool before I learned how to swim. As I sank to the bottom, I had that feeling again. This is how I die. Okay, that bliss, that peace. My sister dove in and saved me, of course. Story 99. The more friends, family, and pets I lose, the more comfortable I am with joining them. Whether it be a reunion or eternal nothing, it doesn't matter. I am still with them again. Story 100. It's the same reason I don't fear the time before I was born. I won't be here. There's nothing to be afraid of. Death doesn't frighten me. Dying, however, doesn't seem like much fun under most circumstances. So I'm not looking forward to that and would prefer for it not to happen for a good long while yet. Story 101. I don't fear death because it is inevitable, and there is no reason to fear what cannot be changed. I do not live in regret of what I have done or have not done. I live life one day at a time, while also trying to lead a life that I believe makes the world better with me in it. My only real fear is for the people I am responsible for, and they are the reason I will not give up today. I do suffer from anxiety and depression, but I have learned to be resilient. Of course, it is always easier to maintain this mentality when times are good. The hope is that there will always be loved ones around me, but even during the times when that did not seem like enough, I have always found ways to be content. Everything passes, even life itself. Story 102. I do not fear death because it would be the end of my suffering. I also believe in the afterlife, and I have seen numerous videos of near-death experiences describing how much better the afterlife is. Story 103. We are all going to die. We can sit and wait, doing nothing, or we can create something meaningful with the time we have. Story 104. My relationship with death is far too comfortable. I have witnessed murders, and the first girl I truly loved took her own life when I was in high school. I think about suicide daily, multiple times. I attend therapy, I take medication, and I do everything I'm supposed to do. I do not fear death because I have accepted it as part of life, especially my own. Not very happy, I know, but that is the truth. Story 105. I suppose it comes down to what you believe. If you are religious, then you might fear the torment of hell. I am not religious, so the way I feel about it is that for millions of years before my birth, I didn't exist. Do I feel sad about missing those years of existence? No, I don't feel anything. The idea of non-existence, of erasing all that we are, might be terrifying, but the actual state of non-being. I won't exist, so I won't care. My grandfather lived to be 93, and toward the end of his life, he became senile and started to lose his mind. He had good days and bad days. I used to drive him around the old neighborhoods he was familiar with and into the countryside. That seemed to help bring him back and provide mental clarity for a while. During one of those moments of clarity, he told me, "Why am I still here? I've lived a good long life. It's time to go. I'm ready to go." He raised 9 children and was married for 70 years to the same woman. He knew that his mind was betraying him, just as his body was. He was ready for whatever came after, whether it was non-existence or some kind of afterlife. Not all of us get to live such a wonderful life, but when I think about death, I think about my grandfather, ready to move on. The act of dying, though, and the possibility of facing great pain, that scares me. But being dead? Not worried. Story 106. I don't fear death itself, but I do fear not being able to protect my children when I am not around. Story 107. I am mostly afraid of the physical pain I would experience when dying. I do not fear the concept of death for the same reason I do not fear a rising tide. The tide will come in regardless. The only thing you can control is your reaction to it. Story 108. I feel conflicted about it, somewhat afraid not knowing if it is just permanent sleep or if there is something more. At the same time, it sounds nice and peaceful given how miserable life has been. Story 109. Simple, really. I think people mainly fear death because of the unknown. I look at it this way. If there is nothing, then it will be no different than before I was born. If there is something, I will find out then. I have no concern about religious beliefs that promise eternal damnation if I don't follow the right path. That makes no sense. Be a good person in life. That's all you can do until the end comes and we find out what's on the other side. Story 110. I lost my fiancée to cancer in 2023 after a 5-year battle. Death came for a visit. I lost my mom a year later, almost on the dot. It was fast, maybe a month after diagnosis. Death came for a visit. Why fear a visit from an old friend? Death will come for me, and I will greet it as a friend who wants nothing more than to reunite me with what I have already lost. Story 111. I fear the act of dying, but I do not fear being dead. Dying can be slow and painful, and it may come with a rush of hormones that could cause someone to harm themselves to prevent death. Being dead means not existing, and I don't fear it because I know it's not something to be afraid of. It makes me sad to think I could leave my wife a widow. It also makes me sad to think I may one day be forgotten, but it does not fill me with fear. Story 112. I don't worry about it. When it comes, and it will eventually, being concerned will not be productive and will not prevent my death. Story 113. I don't fear death. All of my favorite people whom I miss have already passed. It will be a reunion of sorts, and they will greet me. Story 114. I took an incredibly high dose of magic mushrooms during my first experience. I felt as though I died several times in terms of consciousness and ego, and I no longer fear it. Don't get me wrong, it was terrifying at the time, but as I came to, the fear disappeared. I understand it's not the same as actually dying, but the simulation of it opened my mind. Story 115. I wasn't alive for the first billion years, and it didn't bother me. It's probably going to be just like that. Enjoy life while you can. Story 116. I don't fear dying, but I do have concerns about how it happens. I have experienced clinical death, and I can only remember how dark it was. Story 117. It happens to all of us. Why be afraid? Death is just an old friend that guides us to whatever comes next. Story 118. When the lights start growing dim, I may change my mind, but no. I have had a pretty good 50-plus year run. I don't see anything but falling apart physically and mentally in my future, so it's time to pull the plug. Story 119. I'm not afraid of death. I don't believe there is a great beyond. I was without consciousness before I was born, and so it shall be after I die. I don't think that's particularly scary in itself. That being said, I still appreciate being alive, so I would argue I fear death in the way I might fear losing something important to me. However, it's not an active fear. I don't worry about it. I am just death-averse, perhaps. Story 120. I am terrified of it. When people say things like, you know, the switch just gets turned off. There was nothing before, so there is going to be nothing after. I wonder why I should not worry. Well, that just scares me more. It feels like I will suddenly cease to exist one day after enduring a lot of pain. That does not sound anything less than horrifying. Story 121. My parents are 77, and while they don't welcome it, they also don't want to continue like this forever. Everyone I speak to who is the same age feels the same way. Therefore, I'm convinced that at some point, I will feel the same way. Story 122. I developed a kind of phobia of death over the years. When my mother passed away in 2016, I sank into a depression for years, accompanied by severe anxiety. I was in therapy and on medication, but it didn't help. Then, over the course of 5 years, my 3 childhood pets and my father died. I went back on medication. It didn't affect me as much before, but now I experience panic attacks at the thought of losing my husband or someday knowing I will no longer be in this world. If I have to endure the loss of my husband, I would rather die first because I know I couldn't bear such immense pain again. Every day that passes, I know my siblings will die first since they are 10 years older than I am. I'm afraid of being left totally alone, old, with depression, and slowly losing anyone to tell me stories from my childhood. Story 123. I am not afraid of death. I just can't accept the fact that I will be bested by something as small as a virus or a disease. I hope, of course, that I won't die from unforeseen circumstances. Story 124. I don't personally fear death itself. I haven't existed before and won't exist again. I do fear not being around for my loved ones, especially my daughter, who is an only child. I also fear dying from a lingering disease, but being dead itself, I am not afraid. Story 125. I reflected on this last night. I didn't ask for life. It was given to me, one out of millions, I'm sure. I can treat life as a gift or as a death sentence and fear the ending. Of course, life and death felt more meaningful when I was in love. Story 126. I am not religious, but I have a suspicion that life exists for a reason. Without going into detail, I think there may be something after death. I do not know what that might be, and if there isn't, I will not even know I am gone. Part of me is excited to see what happens, but I am also not in a hurry to get there. Story 127. Actually, after watching all parts of Final Destination, I no longer fear death, but the way it happens is scary. Story 128. I think about it sometimes, but it is more of a passing thought that comes and goes, lasting no longer than 2 minutes at most. I suppose it's because I'm still young and have other concerns apart from my inevitable fate. However, I do have mixed emotions about it, mainly because it is so uncertain. I believe I will experience it once I enter the workforce or reach my 30s with real-life responsibilities. Story 129. I used to have intense death anxiety. It was one of my greatest fears until I left religion. Now I am a philosopher, and I believe the universe is cold, empty, and indifferent, while also astounding and beautiful. When I die, I will cease to be, and my atoms will return to the cosmos they came from. I want to be buried with a tree, so when I am gone, my body will decompose and become one with nature again. I will be the soft dirt, the bark of the tree, and the green of the leaves. There is something so comforting about that, thinking of future generations resting under the shade of my tree. In the show, The Good Place, one of the main characters explains the concept of death as a wave returning to the ocean. Each person is a wave. It is distinct, and you can see its shape and the light reflecting through it, the way it moves. Then it crashes to the shore and it is gone. It goes back to the ocean, where it came from and where it is meant to be. This is the best and most beautiful explanation I have ever heard. Story 130. I am not afraid to die, but I am scared of how I will die. I am just an average person, so I doubt I will die in some horrifically painful way, but you never know. Ideally, I would prefer to get an unexpected bullet to the head or die in my sleep, but who knows? I am not religious and I do not really believe in any sort of afterlife, but I do think that anything is possible. I just do not want to be tormented by lingering doom or have some kind of crazy accident that causes me to die in an absurdly painful way. Story 131. I don't fear death itself, but I am very frustrated by it. There is an infinite world and infinite experiences to have, yet we only get about 80 years to experience it, after which we return to nothing, forever. I understand why people believe in the afterlife, and I wish I did because the idea is very comforting. Story 132. It is frightening to me that I will be aware when my time is approaching. I will be acutely conscious of the fact that I will no longer exist. Story 133. I had been dead for billions of years before I was born and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. Mark Twain. Story 134. I used to be so afraid of dying that it kept me awake at night. I nearly died in 2021 due to loss of consciousness from not being able to breathe. Those were the most agonizing 3 minutes of my life. When I woke up, I was likely in shock, but I was just glad to be awake. I made peace with it then. Every now and again, the realization does come back to me, and I may feel frightened for a moment. However, as far as I'm concerned, I have already experienced it. While I was asleep, I didn't know I was gone. That's just what it is. Story 135. When I was on my first deployment to Afghanistan, my platoon was called up for a rescue mission where the Taliban was trying to take over and kidnap or kill some local allies. By the time we got there, it was pitch black, and we had to drive our trucks up the side of a mountain with no lights, just our night vision, which messes with depth perception and became incredibly dangerous because the gravel road was only about 8 inches wider than our trucks and had very steep drops. Being off by even a few inches could risk our entire vehicles. By the time we reached the top where the building was located, we realized that we were in a terrible position. We faced a steep climb on foot to get up to the compound and had absolutely no cover. We couldn't even hide behind our trucks because it was so tight. It was a perfect spot for an ambush, especially with the types of weapons we had been told would be waiting for us. We had to open our back doors and run up the mountain to try to save those inside, and there was nothing we could do. We conducted last-minute gear checks, and then, before we opened our doors to start the assault, we shook hands, hugged, and said our goodbyes. I accepted death in a way that I don't think I could have otherwise. I instantly went from a feeling of absolute terror to an extremely profound sense of peace. and that feeling has never left me. During the rest of that deployment and my next one, I had friends get killed, as well as civilians, when the Taliban sent a suicide vest into a market near us. The chaos, pain, and confusion were horrific. But when someone passed, they left that behind and found peace. I witnessed this several times, to the point where death almost began to feel like an old friend bringing you home. A gift. I love my life, but when my time comes, I hope that what I see is that old friend returning once more, asking to hear about my life because my friends spoke highly of me. Story 136. I am Christian, so I believe in an afterlife. Once you die, nothing else matters. There is nothing you can do about it once it happens, so why fear? Story 137. Life is a part of existence, so I try to accept it. I hope to live to an old age, but I cannot control it, so I try not to fear it. If that makes sense. Story 138. It's not death I fear, it's the aftermath. I hope the angels hold no bad feelings towards me when I do pass, or that will be a hell in itself, dealing with them while being taken to where I need to go. I hope I'm treated kindly. I wasn't a bad person on earth. I made mistakes as a child but learned, moved on, and tried to maintain a good relationship with my Lord. Hopefully, the victory is secured. Story 139. I'm not afraid of death due to various factors. I treat every day and every conversation as if it could be my last. I grew up with my grandmother and was constantly around seniors. Discussing aging and death was a significant topic, and I learned early on that reaching old age is a privilege, not a guarantee. Many people don't have that opportunity. The way you take care of your body and mind in your 20s, 30s, and 40s impacts how you age. I try to view every day as a privilege, and at the end of the day, I reflect on what I could have done better for next time. I feel satisfied with how I spend most days. Both my parents experienced depression and suicidal thoughts at different points, so each time I spoke to them, I made sure they knew how much I loved them. It became a habit with everyone. I never let kind words go unsaid. So if death were to come today, I feel like I've made the world a slightly better place. That's enough for me. Story 140. With death comes the end of suffering. There is no more dealing with disappointment in myself and no more being hurt by my loved ones. Children, spouse, and family. Story 141. I have only feared dying and realizing I didn't truly live. I have done many cool things, visited numerous places, and met amazing people. It wasn't and isn't perfect, but I mentioned to a friend the other day that I could die now and have no regrets about how I approached life. Story 142. I don't fear death itself. I fear how and when I will die. What if it is too soon or too painful? What if I die slowly? What if I never get to say goodbye to my loved ones? What if I leave the love of my life or a small child behind? What if I completely lose my sense of self before finally being able to go? What if I go begging for it? Story 143. Have you seen what life is? I say, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. What I really mean is I've accepted I'm here and am rolling with it. I'm here for whatever length of time and am surprised I made it this far. Thinking about death makes me uneasy, but not because I think it will be better or worse. Just because I'm always anxious about new experiences. Also, to be clear, I don't want to die. I just don't find my death itself to be a fear. Cannot be worse than all this. Story 144. I'm not religious and don't believe in an afterlife. I think our consciousness just fades away when our brain can no longer sustain it, resulting in a complete lack of anything after that. There is nothing to fear. The fear comes from the unknown process of dying. Does it hurt? Are you terrified as it approaches? That's the scary part. The only caveat I want to add is that I've always been fascinated by consciousness, and I'm starting to be more open to the idea that consciousness may be the fundamental force of nature. Anika Harris has a new audio documentary exploring this possibility that is really good. If this turns out to be the case, we may just fade back into universal consciousness when we die, and all ego and sense of self will disappear. Story 145. The last time I was in a difficult situation, it wasn't really scary. It was just lights out and then, oh look, they are back on. It seems reasonable to assume it will be the same way next time. Story 146. It's strange. I have bipolar disorder, severe depressive issues, and constant thoughts of suicide. However, I am afraid of death. There are things I have not done that I want to experience, and the thought of it all just stopping is terrifying. My greatest fear is leaving my wife behind. They are strong and would manage, living for both of us, but I do not want them to have to be without me, especially considering how challenging life has been for them. Story 147. I don't fear it, but I don't want to miss out on my children's futures. I want to see their successes and die before I can't take care of myself. Story 148. I don't fear death. I fear the cause of death. There are some peaceful, easy ways to go, and then there are conditions like cancer that make it slow and painful over time. It can last even longer if you try to fight and go for aggressive treatments for that miracle chance that may or may not happen. And if it does happen, the disease might come back later on, or a completely different illness may arise. That's just one of many conditions that can test your body. I mention this because of the many people I personally know who have fought the good fight and won, as well as those who have lost their battle. Story 149. I don't fear death. I fear dying. I don't believe in heaven or hell. I believe that when you die, there is nothing, though maybe you get reincarnated. Either way, my belief is comforting to me. People die in brutal and painful ways every day. That's what I'm scared of. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.